Every legislator who has voted to support these measures, they all need to stand trial. They need to be charged.
Really have to find that accountability. There's not going to be any repair of humanity if we don't find accountability. We live in a society where no one's ever at fault for anything.
Make sure that this whistleblower is honoured as a New Zealand hero for telling the people of the world the truth.
It seems to me ridiculously grandiose to even imagine that I would stir and arouse the interest of such powerful agencies.
Okay, so Ken, congratulations again on the report. You've been doing the rounds as well. You've been on all these other podcasts talking about the NCI report. We're bringing it forward like the baby was born, and now let's get it out there, give it some legs, and help it find its way.
Absolutely. It's amazing to me how many people, as you say, don't know about it. You know, the website has had, I think, 25 million impressions so far. So the word is getting out. And that doesn't include all the Twitter space and all the podcasts. I mean, a lot of times these podcasts we're doing hit 100,000 views. You know, I did one with Viva Fry a couple of weeks ago, and I think it was at 90 or 100,000 views when I saw it last time. So the word is getting out, and it's starting to make people talk, you know, and people are asking the questions that we're going to be diving into today. And that is, what is the value of it? What is the purpose of the report itself? And we've got two esteemed lawyers and friends of mine who are going to comment about that.
Alberta, as you pointed out, Jason, is a real hotspot right now for change. And for a lot of Albertans, including myself, you know, we've been sort of waiting in anticipation for this to start. And some of it's coming at the instance of Danielle Smith and her government. Of course, the new parental rights bill that was introduced yesterday, and we saw the NDP tying themselves in knots today to try and criticize it. I don't know exactly how a statute that's designed to protect the rights of children from surgical mutilation can be seen through the lens of racism, but that didn't stop Rachel Notley, who thankfully is on her way out, from trying. So yeah, a lot of really fascinating stuff happening in Alberta, but also outside of Alberta. That I've been commenting on. Of course, everybody knows about the Mosley decision in the federal court last week that sort of wrapped the knuckles of the Trudeau government once again in court. That's an encouraging sign. And, you know, coming to the NCI, though, I've been pressing our premier about, and this is something that Ken and I have talked about many times, the need for a full-blown public inquiry with the teeth and force of law. And I actually got a chance to put a specific question to her, which I could read to you.
I watched an interview with Tucker Carlson just yesterday with Russell Brandt, and they were bemoaning the fact that the UK has canceled their government-sponsored study, and we're wondering why no one in the world is doing this. And you're sitting there yelling at the TV, "We did it!"
Yeah. You know, Slovakia is doing it, Ken. Slovakia has ordered a full-blown COVID inquiry. Yes, they got a regime change there. There's just an announcement a couple of days ago, and so that's encouraging. Slovakia's hopefully it doesn't turn into a farce like the UK one did, but
yeah,
at least they've announced that they're going to do it, so it's good news.
That is good news. Let's go ahead and go with that question that you had for Danielle. Let's go ahead and get started.
Yeah, so you know, I'm like a lot of people who have been involved in, you know, this situation. I was very pleased and privileged to be involved in the NCI in National Citizens Inquiry, not to the extent that Ken has, but you know, I did get the chance to testify as part of it, to give my testimony, and also to lend a hand in terms of lawyering and questioning a couple of witnesses, which was just a wonderful experience. I think the NCI is actually the most significant public education project that has ever been undertaken in my lifetime in Canada.
Wow.
And so we really don't realize its significance yet. And, you know, and the reason for that is, as Ken says, you know, not enough people know about it. But I think that's going to change. I think that over time, people are going to realize more and more how important this was for Canada. And the most important thing I think that it recommends, there's a lot of recommendations, the very lengthy report. I think it's over 5,400 pages. Is that right, Ken?
Yep.
And 13 volumes. But what I asked, what happened was Danielle Smith, who I should say, you know, I admire very much. I like her. She's a very bright woman. She's got a heart as big as Alberta. And I think she's trying to do a lot of good things. But I told her that I've been kind of disappointed in what she's done on COVID. Because as you know, Jason, when she was running for the leadership of the UCP, that was one of the things. She was very outspoken on COVID. And that was one of the things that really separated her from the other candidates. But then, you know, she became the premier and she's won a majority, and it's sort of been crickets. They made a couple of changes to the Public Health Act, but nothing significant. And so she was in Bonnyville, which is near my home community, on last Friday. Jason knows where that is. And I put a question to her. I said, given the recent federal court decision declaring the Trudeau government's suppression of the Freedom Convoy protest unconstitutional, the July 2023 Alberta court decision declaring the Alberta lockdown orders illegal, the strong recommendations of the Manning panel report commissioned by your own government, the COVID motions adopted by UCP membership at the November AGM, and the compelling NCI report, will you now take the lead on public accountability and amnesty in Canada by being the first premier to commission a full public inquiry vested with the teeth and force of law into the overall management and resulting societal impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic? Guess what she said? She said, who do you want arrested?
Who do you want arrested?
That's what she said. She was being sort of half flippant. But then, you know, she also said, well, you know, here's the problem. You know, she raised some valid questions. Are public officials exempt from this because, you know, they were acting in their role as politicians, as elected politicians? You know, that's a good question. Although I would say that the Nuremberg trials probably answer that. Then she said things like, well, would it be a complete waste of time and money? And would it not be better for her government to, over time, legislate changes to the law that would protect people, protect their individual rights and freedoms in order to prevent something like the pandemic from happening ever again? And you know, that made some sense. But what I come back to, and I'll be interested to know what Ken's thoughts are on this. I wrote a paper about a year and a half ago called "No Amnesty Without Accountability."
Right. And,
you know, drawing back to the analogy of the Nuremberg trials, you know, let's face it, most of the Nazis got away. For the vast majority of they received an amnesty, but at least the public got to see some of the Goerings and other people, Eichmann in 1961 in Israel. They were held to account, and I think that's very important for the public consciousness in terms of having a cathartic moment and being able to move on. And I don't think we're going to get to the point where we can have a true amnesty unless some of these people, some of these COVID villains, can be held to account. And so I maintain that it's vital for us to have a full-blown COVID inquiry. Perhaps we could have some of the commissioners on the NCI who could serve on that. They're certainly independent. And this is the great thing about the NCI, and this is what I'll finish off on, is we have this tremendous body now of testimony that could all be used, could all be applied there. And what a treasure trove it is. Sadly, some of the people who have testified, like my friend Ms. Lewis, she's passed on now. But fortunately, we have her testimony, and we know we have her story. So I really think this is important for our province and for Canada. And I'd really like to see Alberta take the lead, and perhaps have some of the other provinces, follow Danielle's example. But we'll wait and see if it's going to happen here. I know I'm going to keep pressing her whenever I can.
Okay, great question for Danielle, and I understand the answer, but I kind of feel the same way you do. We need accountability. If we don't look into it, we may never know who, or maybe people aren't responsible, or if they're
Right.
Canadian or not. So we certainly need to look into it.
Yeah.
Daniel, how do you feel about pushing for accountability before amnesty?
It's a good question. You know how that's going to play out. I'm convinced the only way forward is through some type of amnesty / forgiveness. But yes, that involves accountability. Finding out what went wrong, who did what, and really compensating victims. I think compensation is key to forgiveness.
Okay, so Ken, Alberta's moved a bit. We've had the inquiry with Preston Manning on a provincial level. Have anything on a provincial level for Manitoba been talked about? Have you been able to bring this forward? And anything on the executive level that executes things, as Daniel points out, from them either?
I would, believe it or not, I would lean to agree with Daniel on that with regard to bringing people to account if they weren't continuing with the same stuff now. What we know today is that the vaccines, they're unsafe. They were not tested for safety and efficacy. They were not tested on children. They were not tested on pregnant women. And yet I was in the doctor's office this afternoon, frankly, and there were posters up about get your safe and effective COVID-19 vaccine. So unless we bring them to account, there will be no responsibility, and we'll see it continue, and we'll see it happen again and again. And I know that in Canada and in most civilized countries, public officials are exempt from personal liability for enacting policy, but I believe that's only within the guardrails of the legality of the policy. Mm-hmm. And if we have a ruling now in federal court that it was illegal, and not to mention all the international law, I interviewed Gail Davidson as a commissioner, and we talked about, to be a member of the UN, you have to agree to the international human rights thing, and we're a part of the Nuremberg Treaty, and all of these things, and they were all done it. We went against them. We broke the law, but my problem is, I don't want to be double victimized as a citizen. And what I mean by that is our court should not be rewarding tens and $20 million awards to victims out of the taxpayers' pockets. It should come from the illegal. The people who did the illegal acts should be personally liable for this stuff. And I know you guys as lawyers are going to be squirming in your seats on that, but it would send a hell of a message. And again, it wouldn't upset. I believe it wouldn't necessarily go against the longstanding principle of, you're always going to hurt somebody with a policy one way or another. But if you've acted illegally and putting together that policy, then you should have personal responsibility. I'm shocked, and people come up to me all the time. I did a live speech in a little town in Manitoba last week, and somebody came up to me and they said, Ken, if I speed down the highway and I go 10 kilometers an hour over, they've got a formula that says how much I have to pay. And if I steal an apple from the grocery store because I'm hungry, there's a formula for how much I got to pay. These people killed, according to Dene Rancourt's testimony, 35,000 Canadians, and they've just been convicted, and there's no penalty phase. How is it that these people's illegal acts never have a penalty clause in them? I'll shut up.
No, that's a great question. And Leighton, I'm coming to you now. How far does immunity run for government officials? Is the line criminal? Is the line within the law? What is it?
This is why I say that the public inquiry is so important, because it's true. Given the legal structures that we have right now, they're really not well equipped to deal with this type of a situation. This is why I think that the public inquiry is being resisted by elected officials in this country, is because they know that if there is a public inquiry, if we had something like the NCI, but which gave people like Ken the ability to indict and to compel people under subpoena, to compel premiers and medical officers of health and the like, then they could be exposed to penalties like perjury. They could be indicted for crimes against humanity, public malfeasance, things of that nature. And I think this is largely the reason why we're not getting a public inquiry. Under the current criminal law structures right now, it's been a bit of a dead end. And Ken can speak authoritatively about that because of another project that he did before the NCI. It's been very tough. Accountability is something that public officials are trying to escape from, but that's why I'm pushing so hard for this public inquiry, because under the existing criminal law structures, I'm not convinced we're ever going to get there. So I think that the public inquiry is a pathway to holding public officials accountable in the way that I'm describing, and I think that's why I'm so adamant that has to occur.
Daniel, I'm coming to you next. Look, what Leighton said there was, Danielle said it was crazy. We're not sure what was going on. The majority of people, yes. The mob mentality, yes, I can believe that. But there was a lot of people standing up early and saying, hey, things are not right here. Macas comes to mind. Dr. Macas comes to mind. Dr. Trozy comes to mind. McCullough comes to mind. There were lots of voices out there that were suppressed and pushed down and ignored and even fought against. So as much as I want to get behind Danielle saying, hey, it was crazy times, it wasn't for everyone. There were some level heads out there that were right. So from your perspective, Daniel, does that change that argument a bit? That maybe we should have not fought so hard against these voices that were against the narrative? Because that's what they did. They went after licenses and shut down their career.
Well, and this idea of holding people accountable because they've done something so off base that they should be held personally accountable. Like, this is where I'm kind of squirmy again too, right? Like, at the end of the day, they were kind of acting in what they thought was the best interests, at the time, based on what they knew. And so I'm trying to find what can we compare it to? Is there a precedent? So I posted about the G20 because I found that was very comparable in some regards as to the kettling, the whole just tossing the charter aside for a few hours there. And I didn't know that, some of those officers were actually charged criminally for outside their capacity as they weren't acting, okay. Right? I think they were. There was 2 officers or more. And then there were class actions and settlements there for the violations, but they were paid through taxpayer funds. Because, and I guess I would use the analogy of acts of corporate directors or corporate executives in the course of their office. I think generally they're covered, they're insured for things that unless it's criminal, right? Unless what they do is criminal, or I think in some cases, like, they use the word gross negligence. So if what on an individual basis you could find like real gross negligence, or independently criminal conduct, then I guess that's where you would go into the holding individuals, as opposed to the taxpayer to put the bill on some of these things.
Yeah.
But
it's going to be. Ken, go ahead.
I mean, Leighton earlier commented on a person that is a good example, I think, a fellow Albertan, Sheila Lewis. Yeah. When the hospital and the doctors decided that she had to have the COVID vaccine in order to save her life, they already knew that it was ineffective, that it was dangerous, that it did not stop the spread, and that it had enormous side effects. In addition to that, she was tested for antibodies for the COVID, and it turned out she had antibodies to it, so she was immune to it. And yet they kicked her off of the transplant list on knowing all of that, knowing that the vaccine was ineffective, it was unsafe, and she died. And our courts upheld that those doctors, who, by the way, we as taxpayers paid for most of their education, they only paid for a fraction of it. They work for the government because, as far as I know, they weren't working for private healthcare in Alberta. They were being paid by taxpayer dollars, although they set up corporations, but the money comes from the government. And somehow they avoided any requirements for the charter that way. And I know from my business practice that when I would hire sub-trades, the tax people would have a really hard rule about whether they worked for me or they were independent. And if I've applied that rule to those doctors, they sure as heck weren't independent of the government.
Right.
They were sub-consultants. So we had people there in the courts, in my opinion, my personal opinion, and I know I'm treading on fine ground for officers of the court that are sitting here, but I'm not. We had doctors that executed this woman they should have had the knowledge because most of us did, that those vaccines were ineffective, dangerous, and were not tested. They knew that in 2022. The courts applied rules that don't apply by other departments of the government in order to give these people immunity. So a good example where they executed a woman in front of Canadians, and they did it to a young man in Ontario as well, or for a kidney transplant. And so should these people be facing criminal charges for executing our citizens?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, that Sheila Lewis case, just to finish off that thought, Dr. Dennis Modry is a good friend of mine and frankly a mentor. And he's famous in Canada because he performed the first heart and lung transplants in Alberta history. He got involved at the latter part of the Sheila Lewis case because he used to head up the clinic where these things occur in Alberta. I believe it was in Calgary, Edmonton. And he told me that there was a specialized procedure that could have kept Sheila Lewis alive, because by the time that this sort of deal was worked out, my friend Omar Sheikh got involved, a great lawyer from Vancouver. And eventually they finally relented after many, many months. And she got on the donor list. But Dr. Modry says that they could have, I forget the name of the procedure, but essentially they were going to provide oxygen to her on a vascular level. Could have kept her alive for several months. Dr. Modry lobbied them to do it. They wouldn't do it. And so, what Ken says is quite right. They essentially drag things out to the point where and then to save face, they finally agreed to put her on the donor list, knowing that she was never going to survive long enough to actually get the transplant, and that her organs and everything had deteriorated. Because you could just imagine being in that condition over such a long period of time. She deteriorated so much that she probably wouldn't have survived the surgery anyway, which is really a tragedy, because she was a lovely woman. I got to talk with her and I consulted on the case with the Justice Center. That's just one example, but I mean, it's an extreme example of really the lack of empathy that public officials showed for what the populace was going through. And this is why I say, I know I'm sounding like a broken record here, but we really must have this public inquiry.
Daniel, look, you related it to the G20, and you said, okay, from there we found some issues, maybe a couple of cops got arrested, but the G20 didn't hit every single household. It didn't cause separation with the families, separation with your neighbors calling each other. It didn't cause the division that we ended up seeing here. So we're really in unprecedented territory here. So how do we address even accountability there? Because from my count, media, government, the executive, the courts, colleges, law societies, basically anything that had more than two people in it became a problem because they caused a lot of people to be controlled. So are we literally talking about accountability on like every level of our system?
Yeah, I mean, look, and that was when I saw the the air travel mandates that extended till like beyond what was reasonable. Arrive can till September 2022. Unjabs couldn't get onto planes until June 20. Like there was no place in the world that was doing that, and people still don't know this. They don't know how crazy that was. And I tried to get people on Twitter, to document their damages and to document the impacts, personal impact, because we can't just have it in the ether. Like, exactly how is this impacting you? And that's what I think the NCI report is very valuable in terms of doing just that. It's like to get on the record exactly what happened, what to do with that now. I think, yeah, Leighton's point, it's a good fodder for an like a more broad inquiry.
Okay, and then if we have a broader inquiry with some teeth in it, like subpoena power, you can do indictments. You have to perjury. Perjury is an issue too.
What part of what justice is? It's a steam release valve for our society. If certain levels of society can constantly just beat down everyone else, and there's complete injustice against the ordinary citizen, then there's going to be time when we reenact the French Revolution and we're going to the Bastille. Mm-hmm. And so when I talked to Justice Giesbrecht about that, he pretty much agreed with that. And then I asked him, how is it that I asked him, why are judges making these decisions, these decisions on mootness and these decisions on judicial notice, which are ridiculous. I mean, judicial notice should never be used unless the two sides agree on that point.
It's supposed to be undisputed.
Right, it's supposed to be undisputed. And so I asked Judge Giersberg about that, and he said, well, the judges, they're just ordinary people, and they're influenced by public opinion, and they're influenced by this and that. And I said, but Judge Giesberg, how can that be when they can't be fired unless they've committed a criminal act, so they're protected. So my answer to this is Canadians shouldn't be sitting and waiting for, it'd be great, but we shouldn't be waiting for a white knight to ride in or Ken Drysdale to ride in with some report or something. They have to get politically motivated. Yes. We have 50%, if we're lucky, of the populace voting, and the parties know that, and they're not scared of us because they know that you're going to vote for the Green Party or the Blue Party or the Orange Party or the Red Party, whatever it is, and they're all the same, folks. So unless you break that unholy alliance between the party and the candidate and make them accountable to the people by saying to the candidate, we're not voting for you because you're blue, green, or purple. We're voting for you because you agree to do this, and we're monitoring you over the next 4 years. If you don't come telling me you got an orange armband because we're voting out for the other guy or the other woman. And so when Canadians start to take that over themselves and they start to flex their electoral muscles, and it's incredibly easy to do when you look at the margins of victory in all these elections. I just did it for Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. You had guys had a seat in Calgary, went for 22 votes last time around. You have 35,000 voters, and half of them voted. So you had 17,000 non-voters, and the seat in Calgary went for 22 votes. Do you imagine you have a picnic at your house one afternoon in that riding and get 100 people go, oh, yeah, we'll vote the way you want. You just took it over.
Couldn't have a picnic during COVID.
No, I was about to say.
You could on the roof of the restaurant.
Yes, of course. Yes.
Okay.
No, Ken,
so Daniel,
go ahead.
Sorry, Daniel's almost done. He has to go soon.
Yeah.
So Daniel, I'm going to run to you just quickly here. There's 4 types of pressures that I identified. There's personal pressure, your family and stuff. Your professional pressure, your job, your career. Political pressure, what you look at. And then public pressure. In the absence of public pressure, there's a vacuum. So the other ones take up. Yes. So if there is no public pressure on MPs, MLAs, MPPs, etc., other things are going to pressure them, like their personal life, professional life, and political pressure. Do you see that as a problem there, Daniel? And then, of course, if you have to go. That it's really a public pressure issue at this stage.
That's the goal. That's the goal. But and to put that pressure on, exactly. And the question is how to do that, because at least for the past 4 years, when everyone was working remotely and the contingency offices were all closed, you couldn't even physically get your face shown at the contingency office. You couldn't show up. It was just, you had to book appointments. So they all worked from home. Some people tried to show up at the homes of the officials, and that was considered criminal. It's really hard to put that political pressure. I'm trying to do it with the CPSO. I can't get my face in there. They say go to, they shut down the public meetings. I'm like, you can't shut down public meetings. That's not how this works. They're like, no, you can go on YouTube and watch. I'm like, that's not. Now you're cheating. So how do we keep the that pressure up and make them feel us? And that's why the protest in Ottawa, the convoy, was so effective in that regard. Is because finally it wasn't a virtual protest. It was real. You saw the people that they weren't crazy, they weren't violent, they weren't criminals. But then they tried to twist that. So that's why we're going back to Ottawa, and I'm waiting for somebody to organize it, and we'll keep it peaceful.
Did you just call for it?
It's organized already.
There it is.
I'm not.
Drop
I
the
can't.
needle.
I can't. My schedule's packed. I can't. But
oh boy,
I mean, like, it's people. You've got to feel that these are human beings. That we're not barcodes. We're not QR codes. It's enough is enough. You've got to hear the public and feel what they're feeling. And so yeah, keep up the public pressure. Amen.
Okay, well, I won't say you started it, but if a lawyer starts it this time, it might be a good sign. But thank you very much, Daniel. If you have to go, you have to go. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, gotta go. Thanks a lot, guys.
Cheers, brother. Thank you very much.
You.
Okay, Leighton, right back to you, man. You were just in the middle of a sentence, and I interrupted. Sorry.
I was listening to Ken, as I always do. He's a wise man. He's by the way, he's a brilliant inventor. You should ask him about that sometime. But when he was talking about justice, something clicked in my brain. One of the few things I remember from law school. I tried to forget most of it, but one of the things that I remember was a famous quotation from Lord Hewart from the 1920s. He was the Lord Chief Justice of England. He said famously that justice must not only be done, it must be seen to be done. And the latter part of that is not happening very much in Canada right now. And specifically, a situation that you know a lot about, Jason, because you've been covering it more than anybody and doing a wonderful job of it, is the Coutts 4. And you mentioned off the top that people have been wanting to talk to me a lot lately. And it's mainly because I've said some things publicly that certain people think are controversial. And that is, I think that the government of Alberta, which has the sole authority to prosecute criminal cases in Alberta, that is the Minister of Justice, not the Premier. The Minister of Justice, his name is Mickey Amery. He has a responsibility to end this travesty of injustice that's going on in Coutts with these 4 men who've been held without trial for over 2 years. They've already served the equivalent of a manslaughter sentence. These are not major criminals. You know this, Jason. You know these gentlemen. You've spoken to them. Another gentleman who was charged, not part of the Coutts 4, but Mr. Sowery, just got 10 months in jail for driving over a traffic cone. This is real absurdity, and I think Lord Hewart is spinning in his grave right now, because this is not justice. This is not even the appearance of justice. This is blatant injustice being committed right before our eyes. And I think that the governor of Alberta, the Minister of Justice, whose job it is to administer justice, to make sure that the administration of justice is not brought into disrepute, it's his job to make sure that these things do not happen. It's not the government's job to charge and indict and prosecute and convict criminals and put them in jail. That's not the job. The job is to do justice. Yeah. And this is why I've been calling for a stay of proceedings, a full amnesty for these 4 men. This is quite extraordinary in our country for accused men who've not even don't even have full disclosure yet, to be held for this long without a trial. And I think it's an embarrassment. In fact, what I've said is, if she's not careful, this Coutts situation could be to Danielle Smith what the barricading of the Grace Life Church was to Jason Kenney. I've said many times, and I believe fervently, that when people saw the barricading of that Christian church, that was the end of Jason Kenney. There was no coming back from that. It was an international disgrace, and people never forgot it, and that's why he's not our premier anymore. He didn't even get to finish his first term. And I think, just by way of segue here, I know Ken's probably wondering what the heck I'm talking about, or maybe he's been following the Coutts case. But this concept of justice and justice being done, it's not just on COVID. We've got a crisis of justice in our country, and it's manifesting itself in different ways with the Freedom Convoy, with the trial of Tamara Leach and Chris Barber in Ottawa, and with the Coutts 4, and also what we've been talking about today with the National Citizens Inquiry and justice over what happened with the mishandling of the COVID-19 quote unquote pandemic.
We're talking about justice. Now, you would think that. Now, Leighton, you might want to put your hands over your ears for this, but I'm sensitive to the fact that he's an officer of the court. Yeah. Wasn't it our Supreme Court Justice Wagner, that claimed that the protests in Ottawa were an illegal event, even though they were never ruled illegal by anyone? There was an Ottawa court that told them that if they stopped honking, they could continue with their lawful event. And yet the Supreme Court Justice was out talking off the cuff to the public, telling us there was an illegal event. Now, I'm going to add one more to that. And the entire Supreme Court of Nova Scotia came out and announced their vaccine status to everybody. And could these legal beagles not have understood that it may be a possibility they'd be hearing cases about vaccines and or the illegality of those actions in Ottawa? So how could these people, who should be the highest philosophical legal minds in our country, not realize that they were prejudicing these institutions by making these kinds of statements?
Well, he's right. That was the Justice Wagner's comments were made in Le Devoir, and he essentially called the Freedom Convoy protesters terrorists. And worse than that, our former chief judge, the longest serving chief judge of the Supreme Court, Beverly McLaughlin, who serves on a human rights tribunal in China. If you can explain that to me, then you're smarter than I am. She went even further, and she wrote a couple of op-eds around the time of the Freedom Convoy suppression, and in the aftermath of it, she said that the government is quite justified in opposing things like masking and social distancing and all of this. And she effectively said that the only charter right that means anything is Section 1, which is the governmental limitation. So this is very frightening in what is supposed to be in free and democratic society. And Ken's quite right. It was very, very inappropriate for these eminent legal minds to say those things in the context of, they're being the leading legal minds, the Supreme Court justices, the chief Supreme Court justices, and every other judge in the country, listening to them, to add insult to injury. A group of lawyers, you might know this, Jason, a group of lawyers actually complained about what Justice Wagner said to the Judicial Council of Canada. But there's only one problem with that. The Chief Justice of Canada happens to be the head of the Judicial Council of Canada. So I don't think I need to tell your listeners and viewers what happened to that complaint. It went into file 13.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Ken, the purpose of the NCI was because we didn't have a mechanism. So we had to create one, National Citizens Inquiry. We couldn't use the Inquiry Act. That's government owned. They picked the commissioner, all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, now we're talking about accountability in and on a legal system that they control. And it hasn't been in our favor at all. So what are the likelihoods that we're going to get some good justice here? And this is what we've been talking about for the last 30 minutes or so, is how we're going to get some good justice here. So how do you envision it as a engineer, using your brilliant engineering mind? How do you see a fix in this particular situation? Don't use the legal side. We'll worry about that. The engineering side, the practical side, what is it telling you that our chances are?
I can answer that. I've been in construction for over 45 years. And can't tell you how many hundreds or thousands of construction sites I've been on. And I've never seen a construction site yet where a carpenter comes in the morning with his toolbox and puts it down on the floor and goes home and then comes back at the end of the day expecting the work to have been done. I hope that the NCI report will awaken a sleeping giant and fill them with a terrible rage. Because if Canadians pick this up, I'm just gonna read something that I wrote here. I said, within the pages of the NCI report lies a poignant and heartbreaking tapestry of stories from everyday Canadians. These testimonies offer a stark and unfiltered view of the profound and devastating impact that government actions had on Canadians in all walks of life. Their stories are not just statistics. They are the lived experiences of individuals who faced unimaginable challenges. They lost their jobs, their families, their communities, and tragically, thousands lost their lives. These stories transcend politics and ideology. They resonate with the shared human experience of resilience in the face of adversity. The NCI report serves as a contemporary historical document bearing witness to the trials and tribulations of our time contemporaneously to the time. Its pages should be studied and remembered by generations to come and will serve as a stark reminder of the importance of accountability, transparency, and the enduring strength of the human spirit.
Wow, that's some eloquent prose, my friend.
Yeah, we should be repeating that to ourselves each day to get ourselves started for the day and to remind ourselves why we're doing this.
Absolutely.
Okay, 100%. Leighton, we've got criminal, we've got civil, and then government policy. Out of those three, which do you think is a low-hanging fruit? Which do you think we could be tackling first here when it comes to leveraging this NCI?
Yeah, report? That's a great question. I think criminal is probably the least fruitful avenue. I think that's going to come last. I think that we can do more in terms of government lobbying, but I think we've got to be more active. I really love the metaphor about the lunch pail. And, people have to get active. They've got to do something with this. They really need to get active. People who are familiar with Alberta politics know the work that's been done by Take Back Alberta. Actually brought down a premier. We can do this at the grassroots level. And so I think that's really important. But I would say that the first line of attack, if you will, is the civil, and that's the realm that I'm working in. Because, you know, governments and large corporations, they hate to be sued, and we really are making a dent. It's taken a while, and you know, pardon the pun, the jury was out for a while about whether or not we were going to have any impact. But some of the recent court decisions, you know, are sending a clear signal that you know, we are going to be successful in the end. It's like the old, to another quotation, you know, we lose until we win. You know, that's Sun Tzu. And that's beginning. We're beginning to see some of these cases break through, like the Mosley decision that we saw, that we heard about last week. And I pray that these Minnekoots are going to receive a similar, you know, stroke of justice, that this is going to come through for them, because I just cannot imagine how we could countenance those poor men going to trial later this year and being convicted and sent to jail for several years. To me, that would just be catastrophic for our province and for our country. But the civil part of it, the civil spike that I'm trying to drive home, is to sue these governments, hold them to account, and that's why we've got a number of cases going on, including an unvaccinated class action, a national class action, which sues the government of Canada for violation of charter rights, and also for you know, certain torts, including restriction of mobility and other things. So I think as we see more and more of these cases coming forward, I think they are going to have an impact. And to me, it's all moving in one direction. But I think the sort of criminal public accountability piece of it is going to come last, in my opinion.
We've got enough evidence, folks. I mean, a lot more is going to come out, and there's good people doing that. But we have, as citizens, have enough evidence that we know what they've done. You know, they didn't act in the best interests of Canadians. They acted illegally in so many ways. I mean, even if I look at the medical profession and how they threw out informed consent, oh my goodness. You know, informed consent has two parts to it. One is they're supposed to tell you everything they know so you can make an informed decision. But the other part of it, at least in Ontario, I haven't checked Alberta, but the other part of it is if a doctor knows or suspects that a third party is influencing your decision, then they can't give you the procedure or the medicine. And they threw all of that out. So we have all of that. I don't need to know any more nuances. People have to get on board with people like Take Back Alberta, Manitoba Stronger Together, Take Back Ontario, the Alberta Prosperity Project. They're springing up all over the country. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we're spearheading or starting, we're just in the baby steps to starting right now, is something called the Meeting of the Clans. And what we're doing is that in May in Winnipeg, we get all of the leaders of the freedom movements together, not to weld them together into some mishmash, but to have them all tell us what they're doing and tell us what their challenges are, so we can share information across the clans, so to speak, and get it out there and become more effective. So people have to stop looking for the next medical report and the next little nuance and all of that kind of stuff. People are doing that, taking care of it. We need to now take political grassroots action. And so stop looking at that and start moving forward on the political side. That's the only way we're gonna solve this thing, so that it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, you're speaking my language now, because I absolutely agree with what you just said there, except for the name clan. They're going to associate it to the older clan. I'm not joking. Be careful with the media around that one.
Of course they would, because Mr. Trudeau said my pronouns were racist and misogynist. I remember him saying that. So
yeah. So be careful with that particular one. They're gonna go clan, and they're gonna remind people what that other one was. Just putting it out there, a little bit of PR warning there. That'll be a tough one.
There you go. I appreciate that.
Yeah. The meeting of the minds, maybe, instead of the clan. The Medium of Freedom, something along those lines. But I guarantee you, I can see that headline. Blank clan is now alive in Manitoba.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's coming. Leighton, all joking aside, this is what they do. They will twist words. It will make things difficult. And we kind of have to be on guard for these kind of things. Statute of limitation is going to be an important one for this one. The first vaccine was December 2021, which would have already put statute of limitation December 2023. This is one of the things that a lot of people are worried about for the freedom side of things, because you got till the 14th of February to really file stuff. So you got 2 weeks now to the Mosley decision came out. So people are working quick. I had people cancel on me that were supposed to hang out with me, but they're working on stuff for this. It's okay. I'll get over it. But look, statute of limitations for this. Is there one? When is it reasonable for you to understand that there was danger? Because they're still lying. As long as they say safe and effective, is that clock still moving? Like, can we still keep filing? Like, I'm wondering about statute of limitation.
Yeah, it's a great question. My opinion in terms of responsibility for vaccine harms is that the clock has not started to run. And the reason why is because the vaccines are still available. That's it. So it's not as though the government has closed this off. The other reason why the clock is still running is that sadly, and I hate to objectify people in this way, but there are many, many people walking around who are ticking time bombs. They have no idea that they're about to suffer a serious health impact, including as far as death. And so, there's a concept in law, Jason, of discoverability. You're not expected to know about something that is unknowable and to sue on it within a limitation period. So I think for that reason, for those reasons alone, I don't think that a limitation has started to run on vaccine injury. The Surgeon General of Florida just banned these recently, banned the vaccines in that state. And based upon some new testing, they've discovered that, in fact, these vaccines, if you can call them that, they're hardly that, contain nearly 500 times the safe and effective levels of mRNA for a human being. So that what we were being told about safe and effective was based upon PCR testing. Which is completely useless here, but better information, health information now is that these things are not only unsafe, they're deadly.
Yeah, completely true, and it gives me the shivers when I think about that sometimes, there, Leighton, because Dr. McCullough and Dr. Rose just came out with an updated paper about myocarditis. Now it's getting beyond proven at this stage. It's happening.
The problem is, even if JT's out, the PCs were culpable in this. I've met with several MPs on the PC side, and one who became a backbencher over his protests about this. He told me personally that only 5 of the MPs, the progressive conservative MPs, protested against it, and they were all backbenched. I had a meeting with an MP the other day who will he'll have a cabinet post when the PCs win. And we asked him about the WEF, and I will quote him what he told me about it. He said, "Ken, you don't have to worry about the WEF." I said, "Why?" He said, "They're just like the Lions Club. I'm a member of the Lions Club. They're just a bunch of people that get together and talk. They have no influence whatsoever." And there was 5 of us in the room, and we sat there like, "Really? And you're going to be minister of blah, 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 blah?" So getting the PCs in or getting the Liberals out isn't going to make a difference. What's going to make a difference is if these people are afraid that they're now accountable to their constituents, and the constituents are watching them and monitoring them. And when they don't do what they've been told to do, they're out, regardless of party. That's a hard concept for a lot of people, but it's the only thing that's going to save us.
Compare the WEF to the Lions Club?
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
I would say the WF is more like they want to feed us to the Lions Club. Want to reduce the population of the planet by 7/8, for heaven's sake. I agree with Ken that Justin Trudeau was not going to leave unless he's forced out the door, which is exactly what happened to his father. His father didn't leave willingly. He was told that he had to go. He was going to run again against he was going to run again in 1984, and they said, "Sorry, pal, you've got to go." But I think that Ken is also right that basically the difference between the CPC and the Liberal Party, when you look at them honestly, look at their policies, is like cola wars. It's Coke versus Pepsi. Canada's not going to look very different the day after Pierre Poilievre becomes the prime minister, unless people do what Ken says. And so if we can make them pay attention to polling that's in favor of, I don't know, freedom, prosperity, accountability, servant leadership, things like that, that's when things are going to change in this country and not before.
Has the WHO taken a look at this? Is there like an email box to send this to them and get their grade on it? Hey, take a look. check our math. What do you say? Is there any review possible on that kind of level of the WHO, Ken?
I'm quite certain that they have. I can tell you on the 89-page report, like I said, it went out 2.5 million times, and every MP, every MLA, every doctor, every police station in Canada got multiple copies. And when I say multiple, I mean dozens, if not hundreds of them. Now, they all claim that they didn't get them, but we have it videotaped. We have receipts. We have all kinds of things. So believe me, they know. I mean, I wouldn't surprise me, and this is maybe sounding a little stupid, but we've been under a lot of surveillance here. It wouldn't surprise me if they had already read the NCI report as it was being written. That wouldn't surprise me in the least.
But no official response from them. They didn't say it's bunk, it's good. No, nothing. Not even acknowledged it. Oh boy. Oh boy. Now, it's not like we want the WHO to do that, you know, some of the trouble with them, but the fact that they're not even open to have a country reach out to them and say, hey, we did our homework, take a look. Now, there's probably a lot of opportunity with other countries. So I was speaking to Australia, a doctor down in Australia who's been blowing the whistle since the beginning, and they're starting to spin up one as well. And I said, hey, look, let's check math. Let's check our numbers when we're done and kind of validate each other on this one on a country level. It will let Canadians know that, hey, it's not just our math. We checked it with other ones. May help a bit. And she's open to that. Wow. So, Ken, have you considered that, or has that already happened? Are you sharing this database with other people, other countries? And if so, can you share any of that info?
Absolutely. It's, you know, it's open. The report is free. It's on our website. They can download it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and different bits and pieces, or all in one file. So I know it's going out. Like I said, I just did an interview in England, or the UK, I guess, and we've done a number of them in the United States now, and that's starting to move ahead.
Oh,
and
wonderful!
And there's people now that are trying to work on getting me into the what's it called, the big news station in Australia, Sky News.
Sky News. Oh, well, that's a good one.
So we're working on a lot of these things all at once, and we have a really, really incredible Canadian just stepped forward a couple of days ago, and she's working on connections for me using all of her connections. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where that goes too. So we're working on it day and night. But like I said, I have to tell you, watching Tucker Carlson yesterday with his an interview with Russell Brand saying, "Oh, I wish somebody had done something," and they described the NCI, and like I'm pounding on the TV. No, we did it. Here we are.
Yeah, well, you may be a phone call away from being able to get Tucker going. David Parker, Take Back Alberta, worked with them, got them in here. So we may be closer to Tucker than you know. It'd be ideal if he would have you on his show, Ken.
Yeah,
Leighton, no doubt. Leighton, now, global court. So Nuremberg wasn't just an isolated incident. That was like a global court matter. And usually these kind of things start with just a few people pushing, and then politicians push, and then before you know it, enough people push and they have to do it. Is that the road that we're on? And do we really want a global court? Because I read their book, that little blue book that you get on Amazon, and that book basically said, screw up the country so bad that they come for global assistance. Yeah. Ooh, it sounds like we're doing exactly that. So this is where I get my concern up. But is that what we need? Australia, Canada, US, UK come together, do a global court, not within the UN, not within the WEF Lions Club, but in the actual global court. Thoughts on that one?
Well, I would resist that. I don't think. I think it
makes me scared.
Yeah, because I think what we're dealing with here, it's a sort of yin and yang, and throughout history is globalism versus nationalism. There is a positive kind of nationalism that I think needs a renaissance in our country, and I think it's coming. The idea of God, family, country, thinking of yourself as a Canadian first and not as a citizen of the world. I think the globalists would like us to buy into this idea that they need to intervene and take care of us. And we can see in Europe how that's going with all the farmers protesting. Many countries. I saw a video this morning of what a grocery store looks like in Holland, and it's pretty frightening, folks. So I don't think that globalism is the answer. In fact, I would agree with President Javier Milei, who recently in a speech to the World Economic Forum dressed them down and said, listen, you guys are not the solution. You're the problem. In fact, you're the root of the problem. And what the people like Javier Milei are saying is, look, we in Argentina are going to focus on freedom. We're going to focus on prosperity. We're going to focus on improving the lives of our citizens. We're going to focus on small government, and we don't subscribe to collectivism. Collectivism is a road to poverty and pain and death and misery. And so I think the answers to the questions that we need to deal with, we need to grapple with in Canada, are right here in Canada. We have wonderful people here. We have great problem solvers, and the proof of it is the NCI. Ken says it's free, but that's not really true. It was paid for by people, hardworking Canadians, and it's because of people like that something like the NCI can happen in this country. That I have belief that we are going to grapple with, and we're going to solve these problems. We're going to get to the other side of this, but it's not going to be through the World Health Organization, which I think only checks its mail when they're waiting for another check from Bill Gates. It's got to come from everyday Canadians, and also from the best Canadians. The people who can think at a high level, who can lead public opinion. People like someone like a Jordan Peterson. People like someone like a Sean Buckley. People like that who really have an ability to gather public support. And so I think the answers are here, but I think the answers are domestic. Now, that doesn't mean we won't cooperate and collaborate with other nations, which is exactly what happened at Nuremberg. But I think we've got to focus on the solutions, solving the problems that are closest to our doors, because those are the ones we can make the most difference.
Yeah, and so the challenge with this too, Ken, is the war ended, then Nuremberg. We're still in the war. The war hasn't ended here. It hasn't finished. There's no victory yet. We're still in the middle of this. So it's pretty almost premature to say we need to have Nuremberg on this when we're still fighting this war. So could we start to do more traditional things like put up billboards, ad campaigns, radio spots, posters, something a little bit more traditional? All over Toronto, you used to staple flyers all over the post out there. Could you make a call out to people, say, hey, print this off 100 times, put it on 100 posts in your neighborhood, get it out there? What about some sort of traditional marketing? As silly as it sounds, that might be something that we need to do. One big billboard on Dundas in Toronto will get a lot of eyeballs. Is this something that's been thought about?
Well, the problem is that we're then trying to fight in a realm where the government gives the CBC $1.3 billion every year. Not to mention they missed all their goals last year, but that chairman or whatever she is, head of the CBC, is still talking about giving bonuses to all the employees.
No, and you got a good point there about old media and stuff like that. But that's kind of my trap that I'm trying to set here, though, because you would actually know who says no. We are not going to run this ad because whatever. So you can start listing off, hey, these guys are not friendly. And that also might help. There
is one other thing I wanted to mention to you is on January 15th, just to show you what's still going on with the mainstream media. According to the Frontier Center, the Winnipeg Free Press, which is the biggest newspaper in Manitoba, gets over half of their budget from the government. That's according to the Frontier Center. Now, on January 15th, they ran an article titled The Unwanted Unvaxxed. And this person that wrote it was gleefully imagining what would be written on the tombstones of these people that didn't take the vax, and how we went through all this pain because people wouldn't take the vax. And it was just horrendous article. Well, we at Manitoba Stronger Together, who have 40,000, 45,000 followers, we started writing letters to the advertisers of the Winnipeg Free Press. And we got an apology from the editor. Now, have they learned anything? I don't know. But that's the kind of stuff the mainstream media is still pulling off, that they're telling you you're evil and you caused all of this pain because you didn't get vaccinated when you should have. And they're still doing it like January 15th.
That's incredible. That's still happening right now. And they can't believe that they don't understand how evil that kind of statement is.
But I think that what we need in Canada is a grassroots movement. I think that we have to stop staring at the tops of the trees and thinking, well, we're just going to vote change in. Or, if we just sort of cheer for someone like a Tucker Carlson or Jordan Peterson, that's going to make a difference. In fact, the message that people like that are sending to us, if you heard Tucker speak, is he's saying, well, look, you've got to get out the door. You've got to get out of your chair. You got to do something. If you want to have a good country, if you want to live in a place that you can be proud of, that resembles the place you grew up in, you got to get active. You got to actually do something.